It's 50 minutes, 3:55 to Lakeshore Drive, outbound 36. Edens runs 28 minutes, Lake Cook Junction, outbound 24. Kennedy, now 54 minutes, O'Hare to downtown, 29 for Montrose, 27 on the Express, outbound 49 minutes to the airport. Eisenhower, 56 minutes, 390 to downtown, 40 from Mannheim, outbound 41 minutes to 390. Ryan, 36 minutes, 95th to downtown. I-57, 23 minutes, I-83rd, Bishop Ford, 28. Eastbound Reagan Tollway at 70, Farnsworth Deal and Naperville Road to Yackley. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center and our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Cloudy skies for today. Our high at 38. It'll be cloudy with a shower in spots toward dawn tonight, low 30. Partly sunny, mild day tomorrow, high 44. Cloudy with some snow and rain at times Wednesday afternoon. Little or no accumulation, the high at 37. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
31 degrees officially at O'Hare, 32 along Chicago's lakefront. Your next news update is at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Interesting news out over the weekend about how things transpired after the U.S. strike that killed Iranian General Soleimani. Just because it goes to undermine the perception promulgated by the Beltway Big Government Press Corps that this is a reckless, thoughtless, incoherent administration, particularly when it comes to national security, and the continued prosecution of the case that this was a reckless act by the president to order the strike. Wall Street Journal reporting hours after a U.S. strike killed Major General Qasem Soleimani, the Trump administration sent an urgent back-channel message to Tehran: don't escalate. The encrypted fax was sent via the Swiss embassy in Iran, one of the few means of direct confidential communication between the two sides, according to U.S. officials. In the days that followed, the White House and Iranian leaders exchanged further messages, which officials in both countries described as far more measured than the fiery rhetoric traded publicly by politicians. This isn't just one guy with his finger on the proverbial button. There's texture to these operations, and I'm sorry it couldn't include Nancy Pelosi and others who call Trump a traitor to his country on a daily basis, but it did include actual foreign service professionals and intelligence community operatives, in addition to his key cabinet secretaries.
And it was a successful strike. No other civilians were killed. They waited till he was on, a road by himself, and they had the drone strike, and it killed him.
Speaking of intelligence, too, we also find out, according to unnamed officials, that U.S. troops at the Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq that was struck in the face-saving retaliatory strike by Iran were aware that an Iranian attack was imminent.
They were hiding in the bunkers for hours before the first missile was ignited or launched. A
couple hours, yeah. The knowledge of the attack being imminent, not knowing exactly what form it would take, but knowing that it was coming, allowed them to take shelter. Also, most troops were either flown out of the base or sheltering in bunkers by 11 p.m. on that Tuesday night, shortly before the missiles struck. It's just interesting. Just want to provide a little bit more color to all these goings on than you're going to get if you watch the Sunday talkies and listen to that yapping terror Chuck Todd or some of the others as well. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at Heritage Foundation, author of books including Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Good to be with you. I got to tell you, I've only been doing this, since I graduated West Point, so it's probably about 40, I don't know, I lost track how many years, but at Heritage for almost 2 decades now. I have never seen analysis as blatantly partisan as it was in the aftermath of the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. Never.
Well, and I got to tell you, I mean, it continues through yesterday with Chuck Todd talking to NSA, Robert O'Brien, and, getting to, well, hey, Bob, if we're going to call Soleimani a terrorist, then don't we have to call everyone in the regime a terrorist? And then Robert O'Brien had to explain to Chuck Todd how the distinction Soleimani earned through his terrorist activities to have a travel ban imposed by the UN outside of Iran, and the designation he has via our State Department that's separate and distinct from other Iranian military or senior government officials, and so on and so forth. So, again, prosecuting the case, it seems, for Soleimani on Meet the Press.
Right. Well, so it's sad. You continue to see headlines about we were at the brink of crisis, the brink of war.
Yeah.
And clearly, increasingly, the evidence suggests, no, we weren't. We were not in the middle of an escalating crisis, and U.S. response is actually quite effective. And yet, you continue to see headlines come out essentially saying that we were all about to die in World War III.
Right.
Equally, kind of disturbing is the media response to the protests in Iran and Iraq, for that matter, which are principally aimed against the regime and are celebrating the death of Soleimani. And but yet, you look at what the mainstream media, are saying is they're very much lowballing that, not giving it near the attention and coverage that they gave when they can argue it was all Trump's fault. And when you look at, the politicians have been critical of the president, they were so quick to blame the president, make excuses for Soleimani. Now you see the Iranian people essentially going to the streets, putting their lives at risk, saying, no, you're wrong. The bad guys here are in Tehran. And when you look at the level of statements, tweeting, et cetera, from the president's critics, almost nil.
Well, and their hatred was escalated when they learned 3 days later that Iran really was to blame for shooting down that Ukrainian jet passenger plane with 176 people on board.
Well, that was stunning. I mean, particularly when you saw in the immediate aftermath of when evidence came out that it was shot down, that there were actually critics, many of them inside America, essentially trying to blame the administration for this incident or excusing Iranian culpability. It's like people never read their own talking points. It would be if you listen to the logic of how people try to twist it and say, well, this was really all Trump's fault. Essentially, if you use that same moral code and you applied it to when a Russian aircraft system shot down MH17 over Ukraine, another Ukrainian airliner, several years earlier, if you follow their logic, then Ukraine was at fault and Putin was blameless. And I don't really think that they really believe that.
How fragile is the Iranian regime right now? I mean, I don't want to get out over our skis, too, the student protests notwithstanding, in terms of the prospect of anything significant happening in that country, except perhaps the repression of those protesters.
There's a terrific book by Natan Sharansky that talks about the difference between authoritarian regimes and democracies. And one of his really brilliant insights is the problem with analyzing the authoritarian regime and saying when are they going to fall is they're predicated on not allowing people to have full information and transparency. Mm-hmm. And so you never really, and this is why we're always surprised when these things kind of collapse. I say, I got to say that this regime's been around since 1979. They have incredibly strong controls over every element of the society. I doubt that a bunch of protests are going to bring the regime down. But having said that, you never know about how fragile they really are. The Ayatollah is, literally on his deathbed, but everybody expects him to die relatively soon. That's going to be a power struggle in the country. The economy is in terrible straits. They're completely politically isolated. So whether the demonstrations are capable of hitting a tipping point or not, I don't think we know. I don't think we can plan on that. I don't think we can count on that.
How fragile is the situation in Iraq? Trump administration warning the Iraqis they risk losing access to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's accounts if they force America to withdraw from Baghdad. Just in terms of you can do your little show resolution to to serve your Iranian masters, but don't make it more than that.
I mean, I think there again, I'm a little more sanguine. It is a non-binding resolution. It is a caretaker government. They don't really have the authority to make those kinds of decisions. If you look at the Iraqi people, you have Kurds, Sunni, and Shia. The Kurds want us to stay. They very much value their autonomous status, and they know that having the Americans there is key to preserving that. The Sunni want us to stay. They're in the minority. If you remember, Saddam Hussein was a Sunni. They ran a very oppressive government for a long time, but now they're in the minority, and they know the Americans leaving is almost a death sentence for them. And the Shia are really split. I mean, there are Shia that are incredibly pro-Iranian, but there are many Shia who are very nationalistic and want to preserve their own country. So I don't think we're anything close. And even the vote in Parliament was extremely close. I don't think we're anything close to the Iraqi people actually wanting the United States to leave.
Yeah. What did you make of President Trump's tweet? He tweeted in English and in Farsi, basically reaching out to the people of Iran, saying, I stood with you since the beginning.
Yeah. The other thing I thought was really interesting is this tweet says, look, they don't want to come to the table, fine. I'm just telling them, you can't push me around, and you better not kill your own citizens because that'll make it worse for you. And this is the thing about sanctions. There can always be more sanctions. There's a difference between sanctions and implementing sanctions. And then there's a difference between what kind of sanctions you lay down. I mean, people always say, sanction doesn't do any good. They have no idea how much we have not clamped down on the Iranians. And as painful as has been the economy and impactful as it's been, there is way more that we can do. And I think the Iranians have to be aware of that. I mean, we're just shutting down two sectors, which are kind of really their only lifeline to foreign currency in minerals and agricultural goods. Textiles, minerals and textiles. This is really getting into a really tense area for the Iranian economy, and they really put themselves at risk if they continue to do this.
Back at home and thinking about that Pensacola shooting at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, it was announced that more than a dozen Saudi servicemen training at U.S. military installations throughout the country are going to be expelled from the United States after a review that was done by DOJ. The Saudis are not accused, the Saudis being expelled, not accused of aiding the shooter, but some are said to have connections to extremist movements. Also, a number are accused of possessing child pornography.
Oh, my gosh.
But the question is, the Department of Defense and Justice that looked into this now, you're expelling a dozen. Is this going to be a one-off, or is this emblematic of a new protocol to do better vetting of the foreign servicemen that are training in the United States?
Yeah, I imagine this is a prelude to stronger vetting. I think it's shocking and stunning that the Saudis would let that number of people slip through. I mean, normally they're very serious about this, and they know the importance of it. So something isn't right here, and obviously the vetting process between the Saudis and the Americans is going to have to kind of reach a new level. It's really stunning what they found.
He is Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute of International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Take care.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
We have reached the age where things just cost more.
Cars, phones, life insurance.
Your blood pressure is up.
Your weight is up.
You're one to talk.
I have type 2 diabetes, so I'm getting dinged just like you.
Thank goodness for Big Lou.
Big Lou! Lou!
Big Lou can get term life insurance rates for a 50-year-old male with type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure, or maybe he's on anxiety meds for just around $200 a month for $1 million of coverage.
Oh, you gotta say that again.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll say it. Big Lou and Term Provider could get a 50-year-old man, a little dinged up, $1 million in life insurance for around $200 a month.
Call Big Lou.
Big Lou!
He's like you.
800-555-2085. That's 800-555-2085.
Don't put it off. If you're overweight, diabetic, have high blood pressure, you gotta call